Who is alive? Hello everyone, this is Strategic Delusion. I've decided to do one video a week on Severance as opposed to my thought process of having two because I realize I can't easily combine my theories and episodes reviews into one video, which will hopefully make this easier for me. I won't get that view boost because I know that everyone's interested in watching reviews immediately after they watch the episode, but regardless, I think that this will just be better. Anyway, about episode 3, Who is Alive, I just want to say thus far in the season, even though there's only been 3 episodes, this episode was absolutely a highlight. There are several moments that definitely rely on some Deus Ex Machina, but overall this episode shows that the showrunners are clearly invested in moving the plot forward in a way that I don't think most viewers expected. And maybe I'm just calling myself out. I did watch a YouTube video about how Severance was not paying out a lot of the mystery that it was talking about, but this episode happening so early in the season shows us that, yeah, they are invested in letting us know what Lumen is up to. So without further ado, I'm going to start my discussion actually with Seth Milchick because I think I have a unique take and interpretation on what happens in his scenes. So let's get to the biddy, Seth Milchick. Seth comes to work and he finds the balloons that he used to greet Mark on Mark's first day back, and they're just floating in the hallway. He angrily takes them to his office where Natalie Lumen's PR is there, saying that the board is on the line. The board wants confirmation that Milchick feels appreciated, and in order for Milchick to feel quote-unquote connected to Lumen, he is offered recanonicalized, excuse that pronunciation, paintings of Kier Egan, which are basically made to make him see himself in Kier. So the gift is basically Kier's journey, but with a black Kier. I've seen a lot of people describe this gift as blackface Kier, but I think there's actually something more complex happening. This scene is definitely a nod to criticisms about inclusivity programs at corporations and how they often patronize and misinterpret the needs of their underrepresented community members. But I think it also is used to emphasize that Kier is meant to be perceived as a Jesus-like figure. You see, the church is a huge part of Black American history, as it has been historically a place for community organizing and the sharing of resources. However, the history of Black people to the church is a complicated one due to the introduction of Christianity as a means to make Black people more subservient and less rebellious when slavery was still a thing. In a book called The Black Utopians, author Aaron Robertson reviews the life of Albert Cleage Jr. and his attempts to use the church as a vessel for Black self-determination and empowerment. This included the commission of a painting of a Black Madonna, which is just a painting of Mary holding Jesus, and they were both Black, depicted as Black people in this huge painting at the shrine in Detroit. And also, he made assertions. He wrote a book called The Black Messiah, where he asserted that Jesus was Black. To this day, you could walk into many Black homes in America and you will see a Black Jesus on the wall. Also, you might see a Black Santa, just to show that making sort of characters or individuals Black, even if they might not necessarily have been so, is something that happens within the Black community, is not necessarily blackface. But I just want to show again that I think that Severance is using Black Kier to emphasize how we're supposed to see Kier as Jesus, right? And I think that's just me. I am Black. I have worked in corporate. So I think I'm just combining both of these experiences to say, hey, you know, maybe this is just to also emphasize that we are supposed to see Kier as this Black Jesus in the same way that Black people, in a way to feel like they were a part of the Christian ethos, use Black Jesus in their homes and in their worship. And I think it's also to kind of prepare us for this idea that Kier is going to come back to Earth, and how it also uses intent of Kier is used to make the innies more subservient. All right. So I do think the corporate DEI criticisms are there, but I just kind of wanted to scratch a little bit below the surface because I've just been concurrently reading The Black Utopians, highly recommend the book, and I feel like this is a relevant part of the story where we're supposed to see Kier as Jesus, and the creation of a Black Kier is like the creation of a Black Jesus. Anyway, Milchek regurgitates what he thinks he should say. He says he thinks the paintings are meaningful, and then Natalie and Milchek have a classic black non-communal stare-off where they clearly indicate that they both think the gift is bullshit. At least that's my interpretation. There was, at least from Natalie's part, this almost, I'm so sorry that I had to put you through this. This is just what happens, and Milchek just kind of being like, okay. At the end of the workday, we see Milchek take his gift and store it in the closet. I do also want to point out that throughout the conversation between Natalie and Milchek, there's definitely verbiage that suggests, again, like kind of a biblical background with everything. So betterment is used as the term for promotion, and ascendance is used for rising in ranks. So all this language is related to religiosity, and also kind of, quite frankly, a distinction between heaven and hell. So I just want to point that out. It's really interesting to think about what race relations are like in Kier, because we haven't really touched upon it, and I just thought we were supposed to think of all these, like, I didn't think race would come up. So again, kind of exciting as a black person watching the show. I didn't think that race would be a conversation, but here we are talking about race, and I'm glad that I got to use something that I was reading in my day-to-day life and apply it to the show that I love so much. So now let's get into Mark Scout and what he was doing throughout this episode. So the first scene we see of Mark, one of the early scenes in the show, in this episode, is that Mark is preparing for work, and we see a picture of Gemma on his nightstand. In the Lumen parking lot, Mark uses a timer on his watch to time how long it takes him to get from his car to the elevator, where he transforms into Mark S. Even though we learn later in the episode that this exercise is not going to be used for its intended purpose, I wonder if knowing that it takes 2 minutes and 18 seconds between the car and the elevator will be helpful in another circumstance. So I'm just going to keep that in my back pocket, because I think that this is going to come back. He wasn't able to burn a message into his retina, but knowing that it takes 2 minutes and 18 seconds to get to the elevator from his car is likely, in my opinion, going to be something relevant in future episodes. So now he's innie Mark, and at Lumen, he prints out missing posters for Miss Casey. We can assume that the resident artiste, Irving, drew Miss Casey from memory. The team discusses how they believe Lumen is being deceptive when determining whether they'll be punished for their unsanctioned activities. I just want to point this out because it's good to know that they're thinking critically, and it may be helpful in the future for evading other surveillance tactics by Lumen. So it's good to know that they're kind of sketched out by it, or at least, particularly in the scene, it was Irving who was really calling it out. So that might help them in the future. Also, it might help them figure out that Helly is Helena. Anyway, while trying to find the goat people, Mark tells Helly of his plan when he finds Miss Casey. He says he will take her to the south stairwell, which, if we remember from season 1, the innie would kind of push that stairwell, and they'll only have memories of being back inside. So when you push in that stairwell and you come out the other end, it's your outie that is experiencing the stairwell. And so Mark is going to take Miss Casey there, and he says his outie will take care of the rest. And I'm wondering, how's that going to work now that he's fully integrated? So now we get this really awkward scene between Mark and Helly, where he clearly wants to kiss her, but is not willing to initiate. I just thought this was interesting to point out, because hesitancy is a common characteristic between both the innie and outie Mark, and I just find that fascinating, which characteristics between the innie outies stay and which characteristics are completely opposite. And again, we have to think about how the innies are childlike versions of their outies, so maybe this is just a trait that he kept throughout adulthood. So anyway, Mark definitely navigates him and Helly to the goat room, which has been transformed and now has a mini corridor that they must crawl through to get to the real goat room. And there was some poop there as well. I personally would not have done it, but again, if I'm an innie, or I guess it's Helena, I really wouldn't know. In the real goat room, there's a replica of a hilly green pasture in the office environment, and there are many goats, and from what I can tell, also one cow roaming about. We're introduced to Gwendolyn Christie's character, who's never given a name, who asks, "Are you here to kill me?" So this is very similar to that first interaction that MDR had with the O&D team in season 1. She tells them that the name of her department is Mammalians Nurturable. She has a green key card, and I'm just pointing that out because that could come into handy in the future. And we know that O&D also has a green key card, but there are different tones of green. So again, just pointing that out, that might be important. Not really sure. Anyway, Mark tells Gwendolyn, again, we don't know this character's name, that about Miss Casey, but she's reluctant to help in any way. When Mark and Helly insist, she rings a cowbell and summons her colleagues, and they surround Mark and Helly. After being surrounded, Helly continues to ask the mammalians about Miss Casey. Gwendolyn / the head mammalian says they decided that they're going to tell Milchek. Clearly, Mark refuses, but eventually they open up when Mark goes on his spiel, and he says, "Wouldn't you go looking for a missing goat?" And they seem to respond very well to this. And we learn that Miss Casey used to do sessions for the mammalians, and one of the mammalians talks about how Miss Casey told him that his Audi enjoyed stargazing. So I do have a question regarding the mammalians, because look so dirty and so rugged, and if they are innies and outies in the way that Mark is, you would just think that their Audi would be like, why do I show up dirty after I walk into this, corporate park, essentially, where you wouldn't think that I would get dirty for anything and come out. If they are like Mark, I assume, again, that their Audis would be so confused at the end of the day. But I also have another theory, which is, what if Lumen is operating on indigent individuals, basically kind of like homeless people, and they're just happy to get a job? So even if they come out of that job in a weird situation, they're not worried. And we also know that Lumen has, Lumen housing, so maybe they get subsidized or heavily subsidized housing. We don't know. Either way, I personally think that the mammalians are actually severed like Mark is. They just have weird lifestyles that makes them not feel that weird about the fact that they come out of work every day a little dirty and dusty. Anyway, the mammalians confirm that they only know that Miss Casey was retired and that they will not interfere or hinder any further investigation by the MDR team. Before Helly and Mark leave, the mammalians request to see Helly and Mark's bellies because they clearly think that they might have pouches, because that's what Gwendolyn Christie's character says, oh, pouchless. I also, I wonder if this has something to do with that O&D rumor about MDR having pouches, and also the fact that Gwendolyn said, hey, are you here to kill me? But I wonder if there is something else to it, such as they don't really know that humans can't produce pouches or something. Again, this seems like a child's game, which comes back to that big theory that I always harp on, that innies are childlike versions of their adult self. So kids ask really dumb questions, but it's a part of their curiosity and they just want to know. So I'm not sure if there's anything more there, but I'm just going to keep this in mind for future episodes. Okay. So this is the last in this episode that we see of Innie Mark, and Outie Mark is just having a hell of a time. He's going through a lot. So Outie Mark is on a mission. He's flashing his retinas with the message, "Who is alive?" in his car next to an abandoned shed. During this process, Regabi jump scares Mark. She explains that the retina burning won't work because they dilute the eyes before they get down, but offers an easier way, which Mark smartly points out did not work for Petey. He gets her inference that she is suggesting integration. Regabi confirms that Mark's wife Gemma, however, in order to get Mark on her side, she confirms that Gemma is alive at Lumen and that she saw her the last time she worked at Lumen. Regabi offers reintegration with the caveat that she's quote-unquote better at it this time, and Mark accepts without hesitation. This was wild. I think that, considering what happened to Petey, Mark shouldn't want to do this, but I kind of see this as a depressed person's thought process. It's like, either I get what I want out of life or I die. So all he wants in life, and what he feels like is the crux of his misery, is the death of Gemma. And while I do think that that's a huge aspect, of course, especially because I think, from what I understand, Mark was the one driving Gemma, and something happened in an accident, so there's also survivor's remorse here. But yeah, I think this is the depressed person speaking, who thinks, all I need in life is to see Gemma, and I have the opportunity to do something that I never thought I would get to do at this moment. So anyway, while prepping Mark for their procedure in the basement, Mark's basement, Regabi tells him about 5 brainwave frequencies of the Innie and Outie, which are delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. So yeah, just those old letters, Greek letters, excuse me. So Regabi executes the integration, and the episode ends with Mark's integration. And my thought process, I think season 3 is probably going to open up with an early Mark and Petey and see what they were going through and what was happening that kind of led to the Mark that we know today, or the any Mark that we know today. And that'll be fascinating to see. And also great that the Petey actor might be able to make a reappearance. Anyway, that's my thought. I think season 4 is likely going to open with our kind of a flashback, but I think, again, the showrunners are clearly interested in moving this plot forward, so I'm excited to see it. All right, so just shortly on Helena, because again, I have been waffling about whether or not it's Helly or Helena, and I've kind of convinced now that it's Helena on the severed floor. So one of her first scenes in the episode is comforting Irving over his clear anxiety of going to O&D for the first time after Bert's retirement. Helly seems to be feigning kindness in a manner that only somebody born and bred in corporate America could. And I think Helly would have been much more blunt with her emotional expression. Again, Helena also tells that herself because when she's in the hallway with Mark, she doesn't kiss him. And when we first saw their first kiss, she was the one to initiate the kiss. So there's a hesitancy there that somebody who's in a corporate world or who knows that there's consequences to their actions there that we didn't see with our Miss Girly from season 1. So yeah, I think the showrunners, because I get this, because I did mention like that Variety article where the showrunner Dan Erickson was like, no, this is Helly. I think that they probably just were pissed that everybody caught on in the first episode, which I think that they intended this to be a bigger sort of reveal towards the end, but who cares? I think it also speaks to the acting skills as well, because I do think that Britt Lower, who plays Helly / Helena, does a pretty good job at kind of playing somebody acting as another version of herself. It's weird, it's difficult, but yeah, it's what it is. So just wanted to point that out with our girl, Miss Helena Egan. All right, so Dylan Joy is also very exciting. I'm going to get into Dylan. Okay, so Dylan G in the beginning scenes just refuses to help MDR team spread the message about Miss Casey. They mention a new break room, which we have not seen yet, but I think it'll be interesting if we do see it and how that's going to function in future episodes. So anyway, Dylan's plot is one of the first instances of weakness for me. It's just very small here. Transition here that I kind of didn't get. We know how motivated he is by Lumen's incentives, but in this episode, we kind of see him going from episode 1 calling Irving his favorite perk to dismissing Irving when he suggests searching for the elevator hallway. I get that he really wants to know more about his Audi's life, but I feel like he wasn't given sufficient assurances from Milchek to warrant such devotion. But I guess a mix of his personality and desperation for more info on his family is enough for us to believe that he would kind of essentially, what he's doing in this episode, abandoning his MDR team to keep up with the quota. So anyway, Dylan was right on his bet of Lumen actually following through on their promise. I really actually didn't think this visitation room would be legit, but I think all signs are pointing to the fact that it's legit. So Miss Huang picks up Dylan and takes him to the Audi visitation suite, which used to be the security office. And also, again, we get a lot of comments about Miss Huang. Why are you a child? She dodges every question. And I also was surprised to learn that basically Miss Huang was also introduced to Gretchen. So the fact that Lumen was bold enough to show somebody on the outside that they have a child working for them is wild. It's over the realm. But I guess maybe they're like, we know Gretchen needs this money. She ain't gonna say too much. She's just gonna be like, I guess that's what it is, as long as my bum of a hubby has a job. Anyway, in the visitation room, there's a wall showing pictures of Dylan and his wife, Gretchen. Gretchen is actually in the room, and she's played by Merritt Weaver, who I know from the very underrated HBO show, Run. Actually, I know her from a lot of things. She's one of those actors who, she always appears in high, very well-watched shows and movies, but people just don't know her. But I got her to see her lead in Run, and I think that show wasn't well received, but I personally loved it and was obsessed with it. So I do highly recommend it just to see if it's your thing, and to also see her kind of do an acting masterclass there. Anyway, Dylan is granted an 18-minute visitation with Gretchen for his good behavior and output. Their conversation is awkward, but it's primarily because it's two people who should know each other intimately but don't, which is kind of also, by the way, the plot of Run, which is the show with Merritt Weaver on HBO. Anyway, we learned that Dylan is also not allowed to know Milchek's first name, Maybe this is a clue for the future because it begs the question of what's wrong with the innies knowing the first name of Milchek. It may come up again. I think it comes down to like this idea of the innies being children. Since children, we never really know the names of adults we interact with, but there may be something else there in terms of what happens if the innies know the first names of these sort of non-severed individuals, people, workers or staff. So anyway, we do get confirmation that Dylan has 3 kids and has had trouble keeping jobs, which this is really tough for any Dylan to hear. Dylan G tries to understand what's wrong with his Audi and concludes that he's just a fuck up, which is kind of a tragedy, and unfortunately Gretchen is not able to refute sufficiently. Anyway, as somebody who's currently in my fuck up era, I have a lot of sympathy for fuck ups, but yeah, this is really sad. Yeah. It's sad because he has children because you kind of expect if somebody has children, they kind of buck the fuck up and just get whatever job they can in order to provide for them. But he hasn't really done that. And it seems like he's only been able to find kind of security with being a severed individual at Lumen. Anyway, we get more introduction or sneak peek into Dylan as his Audi self, and we see that Gretchen has to remind Dylan of everything, including administering ear medicine for the kids and making cookies. She has to detail cutting up prepared cookie dough and putting it into the oven, so he's clearly not a responsible individual. Gretchen kisses everyone in the house goodbye except for him, which he deserves because he was so rude. I remember in episode 2, he's so rude to Gretchen about her asking about his job prospects. So yeah, he deserves it. Anyway, they have a dynamic, and I just want to talk about it. A dynamic similar to how my childhood was like. My mother did work at night as a nurse, and my dad worked at day at a bank. So I just want to say that this is kind of something that happens a lot. I also, again, I'm Haitian American. I knew a lot of families who had this dynamic. But I just want to make clear my dad was not a bum. He worked many different jobs growing up, and he used to do 24-hour shifts as a security guard too. So my dad did not need to know about our activities or medicine schedules. He was competent. But I do want to say that this is a common lifestyle with, I say Americans. I've seen some people just make it seem like Dylan's a horrible person just because, his wife works at night. I don't think that is really the evilness here. I think the evilness is first, salaries in America, which unfortunately with inflation, especially nowadays, and the cost of living is just not sufficient to allow, maybe even, one person working full-time and one person working part-time. If you were an adult in America, families and households will not survive unless every single adult is working and having some sort of income. So that's just how America works. And I think a lot of people don't have sympathy for that. Where I fail to have sympathy for Dylan, the Audi Dylan, is it just doesn't seem like he's an active parent. So I think that's also a huge contrast where it seems like any Dylan is really invested in the lives of his children. You see Dylan just sitting on a couch reading a magazine. I thought it was midlife crisis. I couldn't screenshot it to figure out what it was, but yeah, this is just a sad dynamic, and everything about Dylan's scenes point us to this idea that any Dylan is going to have an affair with his Audi wife. Again, weird because technically they are married, but you could see that Gretchen is sort of attracted to this better version of her husband, which is his innie self, and so that will be interesting to see how that's executed, how that's done. Anyway, just a very wild dynamic. If this actually goes how it's supposed to go, I don't know if they'll have relations because how would that work in Lumen, but we'll just have to wait and see. All right, let's get into Irving Bailiff. Okay, Irving is anxious about going to O&D because, he hasn't been there since Bert retired and since he's basically was on his doorstep in the outside world and figured out that Bert on the outside has a partner. So Irving tries to recruit Dylan to find the elevator, but Dylan won't join, and of course that's kind of sad. But fortunately, Irving finds his homie Felicia. I know that this is a video of Felicia. As a black woman with coily hair like Felicia, I'm so excited for my hair to gray and stun like Felicia does every day, just doing her baddie thing on a daily basis. Unlike before, however, where Felicia was very hesitant about Irving, Felicia at this time is very happy to see him and gives him a very deep hug that he needs and deserves. We remember that she has also lost a good friend. Again, when somebody retires at Lumen, they die because the any version of themselves no longer exists, and that means everybody who interacted with them will no longer be able to interact with them. And Felicia knows that Irving represents one of her last great memories and Bert's last great memories as an innie. So Felicia and Irving share stories about Bert, and how Bert, when he was fearless except for trying to meet with Irving. And also, again, Baird Egan gets mentioned here, so that might be important for later. We do not know, but Baird Egan is somebody that apparently people felt as was really harsh and mean. Irving shows her his drawings of Bert, but then she stumbles on Irving's drawing of the elevator hallway, which she says is the export hall. Felicia explains that O&D used to send a lot of shipments there, but now they send a guy to do deliveries. Irving asks if she remembers where it is, and we can infer that she does and tells him where the export hall is. So that's basically Irving's story. Again, speed running through the plot. I really thought that this would be a whole season thing where we would get no progress on what Irving this export hall or what's going on there, but it looks like we already know the location of it, and so Irving will be able to identify it, and let's see if he'll be able to let his Audi know what is going on, or if his Audi already knows what's going on. So let's get to Devin and Rick and Hale. So Natalie from Lumen PR is visiting Hale. So let's shout out to the actress. I totally forgot her name. The actress playing Natalie, because she does make a pretty substantial presence. She has a pretty substantial presence here in this episode. So Natalie refuses to tell Devin or Rick and how the innies got the book, but she says that Lumen wants to distribute an edited version of the UUR to the innies. So I saw that Apple has released the UUR. It's only 36 pages. I'm going to read that and probably do some form of review about it, but also just kind of ask how Lumen intends to adapt this book for the innies. Anyway, Rickon seems very excited about this opportunity and being able to get more of his book printed. I just want to point out it's fascinating to see how Rickon's perspective on Severance has clearly transformed. In the pilot episode for the series, Rickon was clearly ethically opposed to Severance and perceived treatment of innies as second-class citizens, which he thought was dehumanizing. But when he realizes he can achieve more popularity through the severed innies, all these ethical concerns dissipate. I think we should keep an eye on Rickon because he may turn into an inadvertent spy for Lumen, and he will spy on Mark and Devin. And this is going to be very dangerous now that we know that Mark is integrated. If Rickon also gets any hints of that, then he might go ahead and run right to Lumen and tell them what's going on. But yeah. Anyway, Devin is clearly skeptical about the dynamics at play. Devin then we then see Devin and she's with Mark, and she's telling him about the UUR. They're preparing for the retina burning, which is what they think they're going to do in order to get the message down to any Mark. And yeah, so we learn about the scheme. Anyway, Devin and Mark had that plan again to flash who is alive in Mark's retina, so that any can get the message and potentially tell them if Gemma's alive. I just want to say this is a great turnout of events because I kind of was sad when Devin and Mark fought, but I'm glad to see that they're going to come back together, and I hope that they maintain that closeness. And maybe, again, Devin will become the Persephone for the innies. She will become the goddess of the underground and really help them with things. But we got to watch out for my big, lovely boy, Rick and Hale. I think Rick and Hale is going to be a issue for all the plot when it comes to the innies figuring out what's happening at Lumen, and most importantly, for Mark basically hiding from everyone that he is now integrated. So let's get to the girly Harmony Cobell. Actually, the episode opens with Miss Harmony, or Cobell. She's sleeping in her car on the highway in a barren, frozen tundra. In another scene, she stops at a sign for Salt's Neck, and we see that the town or city or whatever it is 238 miles away. The breathing tube for Charlotte Cobell is in the passenger seats, and I think the inference is that whatever happened in Salt's Neck has something to do with a traumatic incident involving Charlotte Cobell. Revisiting the area clearly is too much for Cobell, or she just changes her mind. Regardless, she decides to turn her car around and return to Kier. Once in Kier, she confronts Helena in the Lumen parking lot after work hours. Harmony Cobell demands to be made floor manager of MDR in order to leave Mark to the completion of Cold Harbor. She says that she started it, so this is something that's really important. She knows what Cold Harbor is, and she's very invested in it, clearly, because she decided to live next to Mark. She also wants Milchek ousted, so this is just, again, something to keep in mind. And she says Milchek is not qualified for this role, and I definitely think there's hints of that. I also wanted to point out for Milchek's scenes, he seems miserable, horrible, just out of sorts. In the first season, Milchek definitely, of course, was stressed a lot at times, but there was, I think, a underlying of like genuine joy in his job, and genuine, like, even if it was just for power grab, he likes the idea that he has powers over other people. I think there's an aspect of him that kind of enjoyed his job, and now that he is floor manager, he's not enjoying his job. He seems absolutely miserable. I wonder if he will turn on Lumen. We will have to wait and see. Anyway, Helena responds with biblical phrases that she thinks that Miss Cobell has too much ego, hubris, and arrogance. She says, that's not what Kier would want, baby. Don't do that. Anyway, Cobell shades Helena's nepotism, and Helena retorts that Cobell overestimated her contributions. Helena then requests a meeting with the board so they can discuss Cobell's position. However, before Cobell enters the Lumen building, which she has likely done for the past 20 years, she stops, seemingly aghast by the presence of Helena's security guard/driver, and then she returns to her car and speeds off. Now, while I think the show is hinting that the man is a trigger, I also think the context just might play a larger role, right? This idea of walking into Lumen with a man and Helena to discuss with the board. I don't know, but I know that people have been making some assumptions that the security guard looks like Baird Egan, and we do hear that Baird Egan in this episode with Felicia Irving. So I just want to point out that Baird Egan was CEO until his death in 1976. So if Miss Harmony Cobell was born in the 60s, she might have interacted with Cobell or Baird Egan as a child, and maybe there is something that happened there. We don't have enough information to determine what Baird's reputation was, but there could be some truth to this idea that Baird is a Egan descendant that we should take into consideration in terms of how he might have impacted Miss Cobell's life. All right. And that's kind of it, but again, I want to reiterate that I love this episode, and it proves that the showrunners are truly invested in giving us the answers that we want. I think I watched again a YouTube video where somebody was like, I don't think that, they really want to show us what's going on, and they're giving us a lot of the questions but no answers, but I think that they're going to speed run us through some answers in season 2, and I also think that we are only like scratching the surface of what everything is happening here. So here are some questions that I had throughout this, and some theories that I think might be coming into future episodes. 1. With Mark, will he find out about Helly being Helena Egan before Helly/Helena has a chance to tell him? How will it affect the dynamics of the MDR team? I also could see sort of the integrated Mark keeping that a secret until he figures it out, but he, the Egans, there's not that many of them, I presume, so he would easily be able to figure out with his outside internet computer that Helly is Helena Egan. When integrated Mark goes to the server floor, how will we react to what they do and how they interact? Again, being integrated seems so confusing and complex, but there's just so much here where it's like, how will the curiosity of Audi Mark interact with the familiarity of any Mark? So much happening here. I'm so excited. And also, will integrated Mark tell his sister that he's integrated? I think that she kind of seems like the first person to tell. And she's also very invested in knowing if Gemma is alive. So if now Audi Mark knows, and any Mark also knows that she's alive, but she's in an elevator, she's lost or something, what's that going to happen? Is Devin going to know? Another question, is Dylan now going to become a snitch for Lumen? I highly suggest that will happen. We can tell he's really invested in seeing his wife and not interested in the MDR sleuthing activities. If Milchek asks Dylan to work on Lumen's behalf in order to have access to his wife, will Dylan take Milchek on his offer? So I think we also have to watch out for Milchek. I think we have to watch out for Milchek and Rickon. I think these are two characters that are going to betray their loved ones in order to get what they want selfishly. Another thing, will Irving discover the export hall? Will he go alone or will he have a partner? That's going to be very fascinating to me. That's just the question. Will we see the Mammalians again? Again, this also happened in episode 1 where we saw that new MDR team with Gwendolyn, Mark W and Dario, will we see them again? Again, especially with Ali Shakat, she's kind of well renowned. Gwendolyn Christie, also well renowned. So these are actors which I don't know if they'd be okay with just a cameo, but maybe that is the case. But I do wonder if we'll see them again. Again, we have that new break room. So what if they make their appearance there? We'll have to wait and see. Although, again, we got a hint that essentially the new MDR team members, Mark W, were fired and they just weren't allowed back at Lumen. Okay. What are the race relations in this universe? This is kind of the first episode that we get even an idea that race is a concept to this universe. Which again, I'm of the belief that we're just in an alternate universe. So, yeah. And will Black Egan come up again? Because I do think we lingered on that a lot, and we lingered as well on the placing of the Black Egan in the storeroom. So I don't know. A part of me just had the thought of, will Dylan find it? Like, what would that do for Dylan? I don't know. A lot of thoughts. And yeah, those are just my initial questions and theories. Until next time, this was Strategic Delusion. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.